Hi, my name is no longer welcome in my own family. On Christmas morning, I got a text from my father. Don't come. You don't belong here. Go die. I drove 9 hours through a snowstorm anyway. When I got there, he was outside, chained, his leg broken, lying beside a dog kennel. And inside, my brother and his in-laws, drinking wine, laughing, celebrating like kings. They thought I'd turn around. They thought I'd stay quiet. But that day, I didn't just knock on the door. I tore the whole thing down. Now ask yourself, how does a family get that broken? And what would you do if it happened to you? The phone buzzed once in my hand. Just once. No ringtone, no warning. I was sitting in my car, parked outside my apartment, the engine off, the heater still ticking as it cooled. Snow hadn't started yet, but the air had that tight, metallic smell that always comes before a Midwest storm. The message was from my father. I opened it. Don't come. You don't belong here. Go die. I read it again, slowly. Not because I didn't understand it, but because my brain needed time to accept that those words existed at all. He didn't explain. He didn't argue. He didn't accuse. He erased me in 3 sentences and moved on. I didn't slam the phone down. I didn't swear. I didn't even breathe differently at first. I just sat there with the screen glowing against my palm, feeling something cold settle behind my ribs. It wasn't heartbreak. It was older than that. Familiar. The kind of silence that comes when a door closes so cleanly you realize it was never really open. I didn't call him back. I didn't text my brother. I didn't reach for anyone. Instead, I did what I always do. I started thinking, what did this actually mean? It meant Christmas was happening without me. It meant a decision had already been made and delivered like a notice taped to a door. It meant I wasn't expected to argue my case, because there was no case to argue. I'd already been weighed, measured, and quietly removed from the room. That part didn't shock me as much as it should have. I'm the youngest son, the one who learned early that peace was something you preserved by staying flexible, by not taking up space, by being easy. Christmas, especially, always came with instructions I was never given out loud. Don't bring up old things. Don't upset anyone. Don't make it complicated. I'd gotten good at that. Too good. The phone dimmed in my hand. I locked the screen and rested it on the seat beside me. Through the windshield, the streetlight flickered as the wind picked up. Somewhere down the block, a loose sign clanged against metal. I checked the weather alert out of habit. Winter storm warning. Heavy snowfall expected overnight. Poor visibility. Travel not advised. I let out a short breath. Not a sigh, just air. Inside my apartment, everything was quiet. No tree lights, no music. I'd planned to keep it simple this year. Order something warm. Watch whatever was on. Let the day pass without ceremony. I didn't do that. I opened the car door and stepped out into the cold. The wind cut straight through my coat as if it had been waiting for me. Upstairs, I moved without turning on many lights. I grabbed my heavier jacket, my gloves, my keys. On the way out, my hand paused at the closet. I took the old blanket from the top shelf. I didn't think about why. I didn't explain it to myself. I just folded it once and tucked it under my arm. The fabric smelled faintly of storage and something else I couldn't place. Maybe memory. Maybe nothing. Back in the car, I sat for a moment before starting the engine. My reflection stared back at me from the dark windshield. I looked calm. Tired, maybe, but steady. A question pressed in, quiet but sharp. If I don't go, and something is wrong, can I live with that? Pride answered first. It reminded me of the message, of the way my name had been cut out of the evening like it was excess. Pride told me to stay put, to let them have their Christmas without me, to finally respect the boundary they'd drawn so clearly. Responsibility answered after that, slower, heavier. I thought about my father's age, about how quickly people change when they don't want help, but need it anyway. I thought about how silence in our family had always done the most damage. I turned the key. The engine came to life, low and steady. Snow started falling as I pulled out of the lot, light at first, then thicker, the flakes catching the headlights like ash. I set the GPS before I could change my mind. 9 hours. I adjusted my grip on the steering wheel and eased onto the road. The city faded behind me, replaced by long stretches of dark highway and the sound of tires cutting through slush. I told myself I was just going to check on him. I didn't yet know what I was driving toward. The roads narrowed as I left the last highway behind. Out here, the snow was thicker, less touched. Just 2 faint tire tracks cutting through the powder, probably laid down by one of the cars now parked ahead of me. I pulled into the neighborhood slowly. A few porch lights blinked behind frosted windows. I knew this street. I'd walked it 100 times as a kid, but tonight it felt like driving through a dream I hadn't meant to revisit. Then I saw the house. Every light was on. Kitchen, living room, hallway. Each window glowed like it was rehearsed. There were at least 5 cars packed into the driveway, none of them mine, none of them familiar. A white SUV was parked sideways on the lawn, like they'd run out of space and just didn't care. Inside, I could hear music. It wasn't loud, not blasting, but clear enough that the bass thumped gently through the windows. Frank Sinatra, maybe. Something cheerful. I couldn't tell. I killed the engine and sat for a moment, letting the heater hum down to silence. My hands stayed on the wheel, my eyes on the house. Was this a party? Was this what I'd been erased for? I got out and closed the door carefully. The snow crunched under my boots, soft and deep. My breath came out slow and white. The cold hit harder now, even through the thicker jacket. I walked up to the front steps, boots slipping a little on the uneven concrete. Then I knocked. Nothing. I pressed the doorbell. Once. Waited. Still nothing. But through the wide front window, I could see people moving. A blur of bodies, coats being hung up, someone laughing, plates clinking. I knocked again, firmer. Nothing. I stepped back, looking at the window. That's when I saw her. Elaine, my sister-in-law, moved past the frame, carrying a bottle of wine and some napkins. She glanced out. Her eyes met mine. Then, calmly, she reached for the curtain and pulled it shut. like I was a stranger on the street. My mouth went dry, but I didn't move. It wasn't just the dismissal. It was the ease, the comfort with which she closed me out, like I was a memory they'd already decided to forget. I stood there another minute, not knocking, not moving, letting the silence stretch. The door finally opened, just an inch. My brother. He didn't step out, didn't even unhook the chain lock. He just looked at me, his face still, like I was interrupting something sacred. "You shouldn't have come tonight," he said. "That's all. No Merry Christmas. No, what are you doing here? Not even a, how was the drive?" "You got his message," he added. "So you knew." The door stayed half closed between us. "What's going on?" I asked. My voice didn't crack, but it came out lower than usual. Why would Dad text me something like that? He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned forward just a little. "Don't ruin this for him. Just go." Ruin this? There were voices behind him, laughter, conversation, the clatter of forks and knives. Somewhere a child squealed. I caught a brief glimpse of a decorated tree, ornaments flickering in warm yellow light. I looked past my brother, searching for our father. Nothing. "I'm not here to cause anything," I said, still calm. "I just need to see him." "He doesn't want to see you," he said. Not cruel, just final, like he was closing a file. Then the door shut. I stood there, staring at the wood grain in the door, remembering how many times I'd walked through it with gifts in my hands and a smile already on my face before stepping inside. I didn't knock again. I stepped back down the porch stairs. My boots left clear imprints now, big, sharp-edged shapes pointing away. I should have left. The smart part of me said, "Turn around, drive back, save your dignity. Let them have whatever performance they were putting on without you." But something itched at the edge of my mind. A detail. I turned and looked at the snow along the side yard. It was untouched. No footprints, no shoveling. The entire stretch leading to the backyard was untouched by anyone, except a single flickering light way out near the back fence. It was dim, weak, like one of the old barn lights Dad had never bothered to replace. A motion sensor, maybe, or just something nobody thought to turn off. I glanced back at the house. The music was louder now, like they'd turned it up on purpose. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my chest, low and steady, like the warning hum before a power line snaps. My mind went back to the text. "Go die." That wasn't frustration. That wasn't just Dad being difficult or cruel. That was something else. I stood there a few more seconds, staring at the side of the house. Then I turned and began walking through the snow toward the backyard. That was when I remembered what my father once told me. If the front door is closed, go around back. The snow swallowed my boots as I moved along the side of the house. Each step sank deeper than the last, the cold pressing through the soles and into my ankles. The music from inside faded with every foot I took away from the front porch, replaced by the hush of falling snow and the low whistle of wind cutting across the yard. Out here, the house felt different. Not warm, not festive, just big and dark, its glow leaking only from the windows facing the party. The side yard sat untouched, like no one expected anyone to see it. I slowed my pace, listening. That was when a memory surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. Years ago, long before the family dinners turned stiff and guarded, my father had said something that stuck with me in a strange way. We'd been standing near the back fence, fixing a loose board after a storm. He'd looked toward the house, then toward the yard, and said almost casually, "If something ever feels wrong here, don't come through the front." I laughed at the time, asked him what he meant. He shrugged it off, said it was nothing, just an old habit from growing up where doors were more for show than safety. I told myself it was a joke. Standing there now, snow creeping into my cuffs, it didn't feel like a joke anymore. I took another step and noticed the ground ahead wasn't as smooth. The snowfall should have covered everything evenly by now, but there were marks, compressed patches where boots had passed through earlier. Not fresh enough to be recent, not old enough to be forgotten. Someone had been back here tonight. A weak light flickered near the far end of the yard. The kennel light. It was still on, casting a dull circle onto the snow. I hadn't thought about that thing in years. Dad used to insist on keeping it working, even when he barely used the kennel anymore. Then I heard it. A low sound. Not loud, not sharp. Just a strained breath, uneven and wrong, like someone trying not to be heard. My chest tightened. I moved faster, careful but urgent, following the uneven trail toward the light. As I got closer, the smell hit me first. Cold metal, damp fur, and something sour that didn't belong outdoors in winter. I rounded the corner. My father was on the ground beside the kennel. For half a second, my mind refused to understand what I was seeing. It tried to rearrange the picture into something less impossible. Then the details landed all at once. His leg was twisted beneath him at an angle no joint should ever take. His coat was half open, snow dusting his shoulders and hair. A chain ran from the kennel post to his ankle, taut and unforgiving. He looked small. Smaller than I remembered. I dropped to my knees without thinking, the cold biting through my jeans. "Dad," I said, low and steady, like volume alone could fix this. His eyes opened slowly. When they found mine, something shifted in his expression. Not relief, not surprise. Shame. I checked his breathing first, shallow but there. My hands hovered for a moment, then found his wrist. A pulse. Weak. Fast. "Don't move," I said, more to myself than him. "I'm here." I didn't yell. I didn't curse. Anger came later. What took over first was focus, the kind that pushes everything else aside when someone you care about is in real danger. Behind me, from inside the house, laughter burst out. Someone clinked glasses. A Christmas song swelled, cheerful and bright, spilling through the walls like it belonged to a different world. The contrast made my jaw tighten. I pulled my coat open and wrapped the old blanket around my father's shoulders, tucking it in carefully. His fingers twitched, curling into the fabric like muscle memory knew what his pride wouldn't allow him to say. "I told them not to," he murmured, barely audible. "Save it," I said quietly. "We'll talk later." Another burst of laughter floated out into the night. The music changed to something livelier. Inside, people were celebrating. Outside, a man lay chained to the ground, like he was something to be managed, not helped. I looked back at the house, lights blazing, windows glowing, and felt something hard settle into place. That was the moment I understood. Whatever was happening inside that house, my father was never meant to be part of it. I adjusted the blanket tighter around his chest and reached into my coat for my phone. My fingers were shaking, not from the cold, but from something harder to name, something between rage and helplessness. I tapped at the screen. No signal. Nothing. The bars blinked empty. I lifted the phone higher, walked toward the back edge of the yard, then turned and stepped in the other direction, hoping for a flicker. Still nothing. The snow kept falling, slow and heavy, muting every sound but the occasional rasp of my father's breathing. He groaned. I was back beside him in seconds, crouched low. "You with me?" I asked. He blinked twice, then nodded faintly. His lips were pale, pressed thin. His voice came out like gravel. "You shouldn't be here." "That makes two of us." I pulled off my gloves and pressed 2 fingers gently against his neck. Pulse was still there, weak but steady enough for now. His foot was swelling badly. The chain had dug into his skin, crusted with dried blood, parts of it turning dark purple. I didn't dare move it. From the house, a door opened with a click I barely heard. Then music surged out like a wave. Laughter followed. A woman's voice, high-pitched, almost giddy, called out, "To family!" Then the door shut again, and silence returned. Nobody looked out. Nobody asked where he was. I felt something twist inside me. "Dad?" I said slowly, keeping my voice even. "You sent me that text tonight. Told me not to come." He closed his eyes, then opened them again. "No, I didn't." His breath caught. "Phone's gone. They took it." "Who?" He winced, and for a second I thought he'd pass out. "Your brother." The words didn't land hard. Not anymore. I'd known. Somewhere deep, I'd already known. But hearing it confirmed, it changed something. Made it real in a way it hadn't been. Like finally turning on a light in a room you thought was empty and seeing the truth sprawled everywhere. "They sent that message to keep me away," I said aloud. Less for him and more for myself. "They wanted you out here, alone." His eyes didn't leave mine. There was no argument, no attempt to soften it. I leaned back on my heels. The snow was soaking through my pants now, but I didn't feel the cold. This wasn't some family mix-up. It wasn't hurt feelings or misunderstanding. It was exclusion, engineered and deliberate. And it wasn't the first time. Only this time, they didn't just want to erase me. They wanted to erase him. My fingers twitched at the thought of walking straight to the front door, kicking it in, and calling every name inside by what they really were. But I stopped myself. There's no power in screaming at a locked door when everyone inside is pretending not to hear you. Instead, I scanned the yard. The security lights weren't just decoration. Dad had always insisted on real coverage. I looked up toward the garage eaves. There, a small square camera tucked near the floodlight, still lit, still aimed this way. I turned slowly, eyes tracing the property line. Another near the corner of the shed, one angled at the side entrance. He had built this house to see things clearly, even if no one else wanted him to. I pulled out my phone again and opened the camera. No signal meant no backup, but local storage would do for now. I started snapping pictures of the chain, the ankle, the snow around us untouched except for my own tracks, the blanket, the state of his body. I zoomed in on his wrist, marked from being tied at some earlier point, now swollen but healing. Inside, someone had turned up the volume. A classic Christmas song floated out, "Let It Snow." I almost laughed. There's something about evil dressed up in holiday cheer that burns more than just your stomach. It burns your belief that people can still come back from their worst sides. I leaned closer to him again. "I'm not taking you inside," I said, voice low but sure. "I don't trust a single soul in there. We're going to get help, the real kind. But I need you to hold on." His mouth twitched like he was going to say something, but then he just closed his eyes. I moved toward the edge of the yard, where the signal sometimes bounced in stronger from the road. Still dead. I had to make a decision. Drag him through snow with a broken leg, or wait longer, risking hypothermia. Then I remembered Dad had a generator in the shed, and an old emergency comms kit. He'd been paranoid like that. I turned back and whispered, "I'll be right back," before cutting toward the back of the yard, my boots cracking the snow's crust. Whatever they thought this night was going to be, they were wrong. They thought the night had already erased him. They didn't know I was done looking away. By the time I got my father settled, wrapped as best I could with the emergency blanket, and found a nearby neighbor willing to let me call emergency services, the sky was just beginning to hint at dawn. Pale gray light filtered through the clouds, smearing the backyard in soft blue. The paramedics took over with swift professionalism, asking questions I barely registered, my mind already shifting to the house behind us. I watched the ambulance pull away in near silence, the snow deadening even the sound of spinning tires. Then I turned back toward the place I grew up. I stepped inside without knocking. Nobody noticed. The warmth inside hit me like a betrayal. Thick, heavy heat clung to my clothes, my face, my hands still aching from the cold. The scent of cinnamon, roasted meat, and expensive candles hit me next, so aggressively out of place it made my stomach tighten. No one greeted me. No one turned to ask why I was wet, dirty, or where I'd been. A few looked up briefly, then looked back down at their drinks. I wasn't entering my childhood home. I was walking into someone else's, someone who had claimed it with unspoken rules I hadn't been told. By the fireplace, my brother's wife was laughing too loudly at something one of her sisters had said. Her eyes flicked to me for half a second. Not a smile, not even surprise, just calculation. Then she turned her shoulder, blocking me from view. This wasn't neglect. This was orchestration. The space felt staged, like a showroom version of Christmas, full of forced smiles and manicured tension. My brother stood by the window, sipping something brown from a short glass, flanked by two men I barely recognized. His wife's side of the family, no doubt. One of them was mid-story, something about golf and executive decisions. I caught a phrase that made my spine lock. "This house is going to be a great investment for the family." I didn't say a word. I just kept walking. Through the hall, past the den, and into the side room that had once been my father's quiet place to read. It now looked like a pop-up office. Folders scattered across a long table, neatly stacked printouts, a laptop that still glowed, screensavers cycling through snowy family photos I wasn't in. I stood there in the doorway, soaked boots dripping onto the hardwood. There, in the middle of the table, lay a manila folder stamped with a law firm name I recognized from my dad's older papers. Only now, the envelope was addressed to my brother. I moved closer. The papers weren't hidden. They weren't even secured. Maybe because they assumed I'd never make it this far, or maybe because they didn't care anymore who saw. I read enough in 30 seconds to feel the floor under me shift. Reallocation of property, transfer of durable power of attorney, medical proxy revoked and reassigned. My name wasn't on a single page, not once. The signature, his, looked too clean, too copied. A soft voice cut in behind me. "That's not really your business anymore, is it?" I turned. My brother stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Not angry, not smug, just tired, practiced. He continued, "These are Dad's wishes. You've been gone. You chose that. We all made peace with it." "I didn't choose anything," I said flatly. He stepped further in. "We don't want drama. Not now, not today." I looked at him hard. "You chained him up like an animal." His face didn't change, not even a twitch. He wasn't safe. He kept wandering. You don't know what it's been like. I almost believed he'd convinced himself of it, that he'd spun the story so many times it had started to feel like mercy. "What about the text?" I asked. "He didn't send it." He held my gaze, then looked away, as if that detail didn't matter. "You coming here, it just makes everything harder." There it was, the mask slipping. I could have shouted. I wanted to. The urge to upend that table, to scatter those forged papers, to drag everyone out into the snow and force them to look at what they'd done, it surged through me like fire. But I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stared at my brother and let the silence speak for me. He shifted uncomfortably, then turned and walked out without another word. In that moment, I understood what they were counting on. My silence, my distance, my predictability. They'd rewritten everything while assuming I'd keep disappearing. I looked down again at the documents, the signatures, the highlighted sections. I took out my phone, snapped photos quickly, methodically. This wouldn't be fought in this room, not with drinks in hand and carols playing in the background. They could own the house today. They could throw the parties, make the toasts, control the signatures. But they didn't own the truth, and they never would. By the time the sun came up, I knew exactly how little they thought I would fight back. They thought I was done, and maybe for a moment, I was. After the sun broke over the frozen trees and the last guest's car rolled down the long driveway, the house grew oddly still. The chaos had quieted, but not for me. Inside, they retreated to their bedrooms or hovered over leftovers like nothing had happened. Not one of them asked where my father was. Not one offered help. Even as I moved through the hall, damp boots echoing against the floorboards, carrying the weight of the night on my back. No one looked up. I went to the guest bedroom at the far end of the hall, the only room that hadn't yet been redecorated into someone else's taste. It still held an old dresser my father refinished in the 70s and a spare twin bed with a lumpy mattress he used for naps during flu season. That's where I set him up. He was half awake, eyes fluttering between sleep and confusion, but he gripped my wrist when I tried to lower him down. It wasn't fear in his touch. It was habit. The man had always refused help. But now, he had no choice, and I didn't give him the option to pretend otherwise. The silence was thick. I could hear the muffled thud of footsteps above us. Someone grabbing another blanket probably, or checking a stock portfolio before brunch. No one knocked. No one asked if he was okay. So I stopped expecting them to. I got to work. In the adjoining bathroom, I found a half-empty bottle of rubbing alcohol, gauze that expired years ago, and a cracked plastic basin. I made do. His ankle was worse than I thought. Swollen, bruised black along the bone, the skin raw where the chain had rubbed. I cleaned it gently, wrapping it with care. Not because I was trained, because it needed to be done, and no one else would do it. I remembered the old blanket, the same one I'd wrapped around him in the snow, and laid it over his chest again. This time, he didn't shiver. His breathing eased. He looked at me then, just for a second. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. "Neither should you," I said back. The words sat between us. Not angry, not sad, just true. I didn't ask him why he hadn't told me sooner, why he let them isolate him, why he waited until Christmas Eve to try reaching out. None of that mattered now. All that mattered was he was still breathing. The hours passed in quiet care. I checked his pulse, brought him water, tucked the blanket back when he kicked it off in his sleep. With every small movement, I realized how far I'd drifted from being his son, and how quickly I was becoming his only defender. At one point, I stepped outside to catch some air. Not fresh exactly, too sharp, too cold, but it cleared my head. I stared at the empty yard, then glanced up at the second-floor window. Movement. A curtain twitching. They were watching. But they weren't helping. That's when it hit me. All this time I'd been reacting, trying to catch up, trying to understand what was happening. But now I saw it clearly. They didn't expect me to stay. They didn't think I could. The plan had been to erase him quietly, with no fuss, let him slip away, forgotten, let the documents do the heavy lifting, let me show up too late to stop it. But I was here now, and I wasn't going anywhere. Still, doubt crept in around the edges. I sat at the end of the bed, fingers laced together, elbows on knees, staring at the floor like it had answers. Would it matter? If I left with him right now, just packed a bag and walked out, would that be better? Safer? Quieter? For him? Maybe. For justice? No. I needed proof. Back in the hallway, I found my phone where I'd left it charging. Battery at 52%. Enough. I opened the gallery. Flipped through the photos I'd taken earlier. Documents, signatures, the living room setup, the untouched dinner plate meant for Dad that never made it outside. Then I paused. A photo I hadn't remembered taking, blurry at first glance, but the metadata told a clearer story. Time-stamped just before midnight. You could see the back porch door ajar, and behind it, the glint of the kennel chain. The door that opened briefly when music had poured out. Someone had looked. Someone had seen. They knew. I cross-checked with a camera mounted by the garage, one I thought was just for show. But it was blinking, still active, still logging. That was the detail they missed. They were too busy to cover every angle, too confident no one would check. I exhaled slowly. That's when everything shifted in my head, not in a burst, but a steady click. I couldn't scream my way through this, couldn't shame them into decency. What I needed wasn't outrage. It was evidence. This wasn't about my pride. It was about his dignity. I copied every file, backed them up to a cloud account, then again to a secure folder I hadn't used since law school. I reviewed every image, tagged them, began drafting a statement, not for the family, for the court, for the people who could actually do something. Then I sat back in the chair beside the bed, looked at my father sleeping, mouth slightly open, brow finely relaxed. I'd chosen not to shout. I'd chosen to stay. They thought I was done because I was quiet. They didn't realize I was just getting precise. I didn't march in like a man with something to prove. I walked back into the living room the same way I'd walked out hours before, quietly, without invitation. But this time, I wasn't the one out of place. They noticed me immediately. Conversations dulled mid-sentence, cups paused mid-air. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I just stood there long enough for them to feel it. My presence was no longer passive. The morning light had made the space look softer, almost warm. But there was no warmth in the air. Not for me. I scanned the room. Familiar faces arranged in comfortable poses, cousins, in-laws, my brother's wife sipping coffee from my father's favorite mug like it had always belonged to her. My brother leaned on the fireplace mantel, wearing that same tired grin he used when trying to look relaxed. I waited. He cracked first. "Well," he said, clearing his throat, "glad you could finally join us." I just looked at him. He chuckled, like this was some harmless misunderstanding. "Look, if you're still upset about last night, maybe we should talk. Privately." He glanced around the room, trying to maintain the illusion of calm. A few heads nodded. One aunt murmured something about not airing family tension on Christmas morning. I didn't move. Instead, I took my phone out of my jacket pocket and placed it gently on the coffee table. A deliberate motion. The room fell fully silent. "I have something I think you all should see," I said. That was all. No raised voice, no accusations, just a statement. I tapped the screen. The first image appeared, a photo of my father lying in the snow by the kennel, the chain still visible on his ankle. Gasps broke the silence. Someone covered their mouth. I swiped again. The next photo showed the documents left in plain view. His signature mismatched. Dates suspiciously recent. The third showed the porch door open at the time he was outside. Behind it, blurred in motion, someone watching. "I didn't come here to argue," I said. "I came here because my father asked for help. Whether you want to admit it or not, something happened, and I have proof." For a second, no one knew what to say. Then my brother stepped forward, hands up like he was explaining something at a PTA meeting. All right, just hold on. Look, we didn't know he was out there. It was cold. It was dark. Things got confused. His phone was taken, I said. You knew that. I didn't, he stammered. That's not how it happened. I didn't interrupt him. I didn't have to. The silence that followed his words said more than I ever could. From across the room, our cousin Michelle, who'd been close with Dad since high school, spoke up. You told me he wanted to rest early, that he was tired. That's why we didn't see him. My brother didn't answer. I brought his favorite pie, she continued, voice trembling. You said he didn't want any. That didn't sound like him. Another uncle leaned forward. And why was his plate untouched? I don't know, my brother muttered, the polish in his voice starting to wear thin. The room turned, not in anger, but in realization. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just stood my ground. Then, as expected, came the deflection. You're making this worse, his wife snapped. Dragging up drama. He's old. He forgets things. We were just trying to keep things simple. I turned to her. Simple for who? She looked away. There it was again, that pull to stay quiet, to let it slide, for the sake of peace, for the illusion of unity. But I didn't move. I didn't explain myself. I didn't ask for permission to care. And then I said one sentence. Dad didn't choose any of this. You did. That was it. The room went still. No rebuttal, no correction, just stillness. Because they knew, and worse, they knew I knew. I looked around once more, at the people who'd shared our family table for decades, now blinking like strangers who'd stumbled into someone else's house. They weren't evil, but they were complicit. In silence, in comfort, in pretending the truth was too messy to be worth facing. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. That was when my brother realized I wasn't asking for space. I was taking it.
But the room didn't explode. It didn't implode either. It just settled, like dust after something breaks. There was this eerie stillness. No shouting, no chairs scraping, just people suddenly very interested in anything but me. Some stared down at their coffee mugs. Others busied themselves with folding napkins or adjusting their scarves. Even the fireplace seemed quieter, like it too was trying not to get involved. And that's what made me uneasy. I knew silence in this family wasn't peace. It was planning. My brother stood near the edge of the hallway, hands clasped like a Sunday school teacher. That same tired smile crept back across his face, but it didn't reach his eyes this time. You know, he began, voice soft, like he was choosing diplomacy over drama. We've all been under a lot of stress lately, especially you. He said it like concern, not sympathy. Concern. There it was, the pivot. I mean, we understand this has been a tough year for you. Coming back into the family circle like this, everything feeling unfamiliar. A few heads nodded, slowly, unsure. I just think, he continued, turning now to face the room, not me. Maybe we need to think about what's really best for Dad, for all of us. And just like that, I wasn't the son trying to protect his father. I was the one making things complicated. I could feel it shift. The tension didn't dissolve. It rotated. My Aunt Diane whispered something to her husband. He glanced at me, then down again. My cousin Jonah stepped a little farther from me like I'd suddenly become contagious. "I've always said you meant well," my brother said, now placing a hand on the arm of Dad's favorite chair. "But sometimes the people closest to a situation aren't the most objective, especially when emotions are high." He didn't need to say what he really meant. He wanted them to think I was unstable, maybe even dangerous. And then, like clockwork, his wife pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen twice, didn't look up. But it was clear. She was calling someone. Not a friend, not a neighbor, someone official. I took one step forward, then stopped. Eyes were on me again, but now, not with curiosity, with caution. "Hang on," I said, calm, clear. "What are you doing?" My brother didn't answer. His wife did. "We just think someone should evaluate the situation before it escalates." A few others nodded, not out of malice, but out of fear. Fear of the uncomfortable, of the unfamiliar. I had the truth, but suddenly it felt like a fragile thing, a slippery thing, because now it wasn't about my father lying in the snow. It wasn't about forged signatures or unanswered texts. It was about me. And if I pushed too hard now, if I raised my voice, demanded answers, made a scene, they wouldn't see a son trying to protect his parent. They'd see exactly what my brother wanted them to see. So I stopped, not out of defeat, out of strategy. I lowered my voice even more. "I'm not here for a fight," I said. "I'm here because last night someone let a man freeze on Christmas Eve." The words landed, but not enough. My brother stepped in, voice steady, rehearsed. "And we're all deeply sorry about that. But this isn't the way to handle things. You're making everyone uncomfortable." Another classic move. Turn facts into feelings. Reframe concern as aggression. I took a breath, and I stopped talking about me. Instead, I pulled up one more thing on my phone, a time-stamped message thread from Dad's number, one that hadn't come from him, but from whoever had his phone last night. I held the screen up, not shoving it in faces, just enough for them to see. Quiet, undeniable. "You want to talk about what's uncomfortable?" I said. "Let's talk about someone using his phone to keep me away." The room went still again, but I didn't look at them this time. I looked at my brother. "You're right about one thing," I said. "This isn't about me." He blinked. "It's about a man who gave this family everything, and who deserved better than to be left alone in the dark while everyone toasted each other with his bourbon." Then came the sentence, the one that ended the spin. "No one's asking why Dad was outside, because they already know the answer." That was it. There wasn't a single shout, not a word, just a long, sinking silence that filled every corner of the house. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt all morning. Control. They could make calls. They could whisper. They could act concerned. But the truth didn't need to shout. By the time the door opened, the truth was no longer something they could manage.
But I didn't watch them squirm. I didn't listen for apologies that wouldn't come. I didn't need to. I stepped out into the cold, leaving behind the heat of the house that never felt like home anymore. The sunlight had shifted. It was later now, probably early afternoon. Christmas Day. The air was dry and still, the kind of quiet that always comes after a storm, but before anything blooms again. 2 paramedics stood by the open gate. Not for me. Not yet. Someone must have called in the concern about my state of mind earlier, but their posture told me everything. They were here out of obligation, not urgency. I didn't stop to explain anything to them. I walked back inside just long enough to help my father sit up, wrap the old blanket gently around his shoulders again, and guide him slowly toward the front door. His steps were small but steady. I didn't rush him. As we passed the living room, nobody said a word. They didn't try to stop us. Some avoided looking at us. Some watched closely, maybe waiting for me to make one wrong move so they could justify everything they'd done. But nothing happened. No outburst, no drama. Just two people walking out, one helping the other. My brother stayed near the staircase, arms crossed, chin up. The man who thought control was the same thing as love. I didn't even look at him. When we reached the car, I opened the passenger side first and helped Dad ease in. I tucked the blanket around him carefully, just like I'd done when I was a kid and he fell asleep in the recliner after work. He didn't speak, but his hand found mine for a second. That was enough. I closed the door and took one last glance back at the house. The front window was full of faces. Some I knew, some I barely recognized. All of them staring, and yet not one of them stepped outside. Driving away didn't feel triumphant. It didn't feel like a win. If anything, it felt like setting down a burden you'd carried too far just to prove you could. I didn't get the inheritance, not that I ever expected it. But now, I wouldn't even get the illusion of a family sitting together again at one table, not even out of habit. There'd be no more, maybe next year's, no more text chains about who's bringing pie or whether the turkey's too dry. But in the rearview mirror, the house got smaller. And what I had beside me? That stayed real. I don't forgive them, not because I'm bitter, but because forgiveness, to me, means you believe someone would have done better if they knew how. And they knew. They just didn't care to. I also don't hate them. I don't need to. Hate is heavy, and I already left enough behind. What I took with me wasn't revenge or proof or pride. It was my father. That mattered more than any document, any name on a deed, any hollow toast made around a table full of people more interested in preserving legacy than protecting a man's dignity. There's a kind of peace that comes when you stop needing things to be fair. That's what I found on the road away from that place. Not joy, not justice, just clarity. As the house disappeared behind a stand of bare trees, I let myself breathe deeper. I didn't feel like I'd saved Christmas. I didn't even feel like I'd ended a fight. I just felt like I'd finally told the truth out loud and walked away with what little of it was still mine. Dad dozed quietly, the blanket pulled up to his chin, the sunlight catching on the edge of his silver hair. I turned the radio on low, some soft instrumental version of a carol playing, the kind you'd hear in a quiet diner or an old truck stop. This Christmas wasn't joyful. It wasn't cozy or loud or picture perfect. It was something quieter, smaller, honest. And maybe that's the best kind of holy day you can ask for, once you've lived long enough to know better. You spend half your life trying to get invited to the table. Then one day, you realize the real power is in knowing when to walk away from it, and who to take with you. Family isn't who controls you. It's who you protect. I didn't save Christmas. I saved what was left of us. And that was enough.